Si vais a hacer un aplauso, hacerlo bien. Bueno, último código fuente audiovisual de la historia del Festival CEMOS 98. Poca cosa, nano. Bueno, Rubén Martínez, que es la persona que va a hacer el código fuente audiovisual, es miembro de la Hidra Cooperativa y también miembro del Observatorio Metropolitano de Barcelona. Ambos forman parte de la red de la Fundación de los Comunes. Él es investigador y profesor. Y además es muy amigo de la familia de CEMOS 98 y también amigo mío. Esto que acabo de hacer es su currículum formal. Habitualmente, cuando nos presentamos en contextos como el del festival a otras personas, lo hacemos con qué hacemos profesionalmente, qué es lo que producimos, digamos qué es lo que genera recursos. Pero, de alguna manera, la lógica de cómo podría ser un anticurrículum, es decir, ¿qué podría representarnos que no está en un currículum? Aquello que nos da vergüenza, aquello que nos da miedo, esas vulnerabilidades que en realidad forman una parte esencial de nosotros, tienen mucho que ver con la idea de código fuente. Como sabéis, el código fuente del software es el lenguaje en el que está escrito y, por tanto, si este código es abierto o es libre, como el caso del software libre o de código abierto, esto permite que otras personas lo reescriban. Claro, hacer una traslación entre un software y, digamos, el imaginario o la identidad de una persona no es tan sencillo, pero para eso está CEMOS 98. Para hacer ese tipo de conexiones que para algunas personas a veces son extrañas o esquivas, pero que en el fondo no dejan de ser, como hemos dicho estos días, experimentos. Si CEMOS 98 es un experimento y en nuestro código fuente hay evidentemente muchos errores y muchos problemas. En ambos casos, tanto ayer con Belén Gopegui como hoy con Rubén, dado que es un código fuente audiovisual, a veces especialmente si sois de fuera de España, y este comentario va especialmente para esa comunidad, ese grupo, es complicado entrar en ese código, porque no todo puede ser traducido literalmente, ni todas esas referencias son fáciles de interpretar. Pero puedo asegurar que, a pesar de esa dificultad, tanto lo que escuchamos ayer como lo que vamos a escuchar hoy tiene muchísimo que ver con lo que está pasando en nuestros barrios, en nuestras ciudades y en Europa. Dicho esto, después de esa presentación formal que he hecho de Rubén, dado que soy su amigo, tenía que mostrar algo de nuestro código fuente como amigos, lo cual implica que vais a ver cosas que a ambos nos dan vergüenza. La diferencia es que yo sí sé cuáles son y él no, porque además hemos hecho un esfuerzo muy grande en que él no sepa qué voy a poner ahora. Vamos a empezar con una fotografía tomada hoy. Tengo que darle las gracias a Mario, porque gracias a él, que está participando en el hackathon, tenemos esta fotografía, porque digamos que vamos a hacer un viaje desde hoy, el presente, hasta el momento en el que yo conocí a Rubén. Eso era un efecto para intrigaros más, ¿vale? Aquí no se aprecia, pero bueno, cuando he dicho que Rubén es investigador y es profesor, no solo me refiero al hecho de que sea una persona muy inteligente, que lo es, sino que digamos que las dimensiones de su cabeza permiten albergar todo ese conocimiento.
The source code of our friendship. Cough, cough.
De nuevo, si vais a aplaudir, por favor,
Now, if you're going to
hacer.
applaud, just do it properly.
Bien, voy a enseñaros ahora la primera foto.
I'm going to show you the first picture that we have of Rubén and I, and it dates back to 2008.
A recibir a Pedro Jiménez.
Before that, we're going to give a big welcome to Pedro Jiménez.
La primera fotografía data, como he
So
dicho,
the
de
first
2008.
picture dates back from 2008, as we've said,
Se produce en México.
and it comes from Mexico. Here, Nelly Lloveras, who
Rubén,
is also in the audience, a good friend of Rubén.
o sea, en un proyecto en el que todavía sigue
We're together in a
trabajando,
project
que
that's
es Hamaco,
still going on, still working on, it's
publicidad
Hamaco.
gratuita.
Media art distribution, free advertising, invited us to Mexico to carry out our workshop and share a series of activities during a week. I have to say that Rubén, after that, confessed to us that not only did it bother him to have to live together with two people he didn't really know because we were sharing a flat, but, you know, he didn't stop making jokes with something that eventually became a mantra for us. And it was that us from Themos, you know, like us guys from Themos, if you were to use the Spanish gender, nosotros, we're wearing hoodies. We only use hoodies. So I mean, this is like a very minimal hoodie. You can't really see it, but it's there. I've told you the stuff here that's a bit fucked up. Well, no comment. Something else that has really impacted our relationship, and it's the fact that within this admiration we have for his intelligence and his work, in more than one occasion we've held debates on the intuition and rigor and how they combine together. Now, Rubén is obsessively rigorous with anything that has to do with getting to like the root of a problem he wants to research and deal with. In certain occasions, he's allowed himself a few investigations in that other part that has a lot to do with intuition. So while he was in Mexico, he offered to make a video. It was going to be an advertisement for Macaba, which is also really representative of our relation, even if it was during the first week we met each other.
Es un media maker.
He's a media maker.
Rubén tiene una página web que muy poca
Has a
gente
website
conoce
that
y
not
que
many
no voy a
people
decir
know,
donde escribe a veces relatos.
and I'm not going to tell you what it is, where he writes
Voy a compartiros
tales.
uno muy corto
I'm going to share with you a really short one titled
y que de alguna manera tiene que
Liberty,
ver con lo que
and
él va a
it
contar
somehow
en
has
un
to
momento.
do with what he's going to be talking about in a moment.
Y dice así:
And it says, paradoxically,
el rey otorgó
the
la
king
libertad a sus súbditos
granted
con
liberty
una
to his
última orden.
subjects with one
Sed
last
libres.
order: be free.
Dentro de ese binomio que os he dicho que
Within
conviven en
that,
él,
these
la
two
intuición
aspects that
y el
live
rigor,
inside of him,
hubo
intuition
una
and
ocasión,
rigor.
y me alegra porque antes ha visto una imagen así
One
parcialmente y
time,
no se acuerda, que me dijo,
this makes me happy because there's been this partial image that he doesn't remember. You know, he told me, now I'm a video artist. Send me an email saying, look at this video.
él no se acuerde. Y es una de
He
estas
probably
cosas
won't
que
remember
son
this, but it's
parte
one of
de
those
una
things
relación
that,
entre dos personas, de
you know,
mandarse cosas
it's part of the matrix of a relationship between two people, sending each other things that are special, and that I think it's very coherent with that attitude.
Y por último,
And lastly,
hace
some, well, let's say that in the equator of our relationship, the halfway point, while I was revising all the source material, there was a lot of stuff, including some really long, tedious emails written by the both of us, and then more compact emails. So one time, when we invited ourselves to think together, and this actually came out of the Copylove research project about the economy of caretaking and mutual caretaking, he sent us this quote that I think really defines really well our relationship and what's going to happen now. Loving someone is hearing him or her tell his or her life while you tell him or her your life. Because of this quote and because I really love Rubén, what's going to happen now is what this quote represents. So I'll leave you with the audiovisual source code of Rubén Martínez. I hope you enjoy it because it's the last one. And thank you so much for coming here tonight.
Folsom Prison Blues.
No, me, but take yourself.
It's okay.
En enero del 68,
In
Johnny Cash
January
tocaba en directo la
1968,
canción Folsom Prison Blues en la
Johnny
prisión
Cash
estatal de
played
Folsom,
live the
una
song
ciudad del
Folsom
estado de
Prison
California.
Blues in a
La
prison in
prisión era el motivo
California
de la
state.
canción y también daría título al álbum de aquel concierto,
The
At
song
Folsom Prison.
gave its name to the title that
El
contained
álbum
it.
compilaba casi todos los temas que
The
Cash
album
interpretó en la
included
prisión
almost
Folsom
all the
y fue puesto en venta meses más
tracks
tarde por Columbia
that he
Records.
played. It was released
mayo del
later by
68.
Columbia Records in May 1968.
Cuando oigo sonar la canción Folsom Prison Blues, me pregunto
When
qué debían
I
sentir esos
hear the
prisioneros
song, I
que hace casi
ask myself,
50
I
años
wonder
la
what those
escuchaban en directo
prisoners who were
justo
listening
bajo el mismo
to
techo que
Johnny Cash
cumplían
playing
condena.
live that day were feeling
¿Qué
and
debía
thinking,
pasar por sus
what was
cabezas
going through their
mientras Johnny
heads
Cash tocaba el tema
as
sobre la
Johnny
prisión en la que
Cash
estaban
played
encerrados?
the song about the prison
sentían
that they
más
were
libres
prisoners in?
o se
Did
sentían
it make
más
them
condenados?
feel freer, or did
El
it
poder les recordaba con
make them
aquella
feel
canción la libertad que no
more
tenían,
imprisoned?
o por un momento
Did it
volvían
make
a
them
ser
think about
personas
the
libres.
freedom that they had, or did it make them free for a
Me pregunto
moment?
qué sentían y qué era
I
aquello.
wonder what they
¿Era
felt.
aquel concierto un premio o era
What
un
was
castigo?
that? Was that
¿Era un breve y
a
feliz
reward,
indulto
or was it a
o era un
punishment?
mecanismo para disciplinar mejor a los posibles rebeldes?
Was it a good thing, or was it a worse
Imaginad que
punishment
estamos
for
en
the
una prisión.
rebels? Imagine that you are in the
Imaginad que
prison.
esto es una prisión
Imagine that
y
this
que
is a
eso que suena es
prison
Johnny Cash tocando en
and
directo.
that you're hearing Johnny Cash
Que
play
Johnny Cash
live.
toca
Imagine
Folsom
that
Prison Blues
Johnny Cash
minutos
is playing
antes de
Folsom
que volváis
Prison
de nuevo a vuestra celda.
Blues a few minutes before you go back into your cell. What would you feel?
And I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps a rolling on down to San Antonio. When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. When I hear that whistle blowing, I hang my head and cry.
Buenas, efectivamente soy
Hello,
Rubén Martínez. He
Rubén
sido
Martínez in
troleado
person.
sin saberlo
I've been
antes de
trolled
empezar por
without
mi querido
warning
amigo
before starting by my dear
y mi
friend
amor Felipe.
and my love, Felipe.
Ya hablaremos.
We'll talk later.
La verdad que para mí es un privilegio
For
poder
me,
hacer
it's a privilege to be here to do this source code today, especially as Felipe said, because it's the last festival, and for me, the Most 98 festival is very important, not just because of the people I've met, but also because of the things that we've thought together. But I'm also happy to be here because for me, this format of the audiovisual source code was pretty amazing from when I discovered it. I think it was at the festival which had a theme, expanded education. It was Antonio González, who I'm a great fan of. And also I think that the videos that I saw in that presentation, I've been watching them continuously ever since. I was quite tempted to include one of them in my own source code, but I thought that the meta-reference was maybe not really, there was not really any point to it, and it's not really about what mine is about anyway. So it's a privilege for me to be here because of the people who have invited me, trolling me with love, and also because I love the format. So, apart from all of this, this song you were listening to, Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash. I discovered Johnny Cash quite late in life, thanks to Dani Granados, who's another good friend from Barcelona, who plays in a band and has his own net label. And between Dani and singers, we're talking about friends, so between Dani and Eli Lloveras, who's another friend who's already been mentioned today, they made me discover that music was an important thing. I don't know much about it, but ever since Dani played Johnny Cash for me, I haven't stopped listening to it. So I've decided to start with this song partly because Johnny Cash makes me happy. I was quite nervous, but as soon as I heard that song, I felt good. Oh, still a little bit, but pretty good. And also because of the track itself and the topic, because Johnny Cash is not the only person to have covered it, or to have gone to prisons to play these songs. So he went to a prison to talk about somebody who killed somebody just for the pleasure of seeing a person die, and he went to sing it. The person in the song goes to the same prison where he sang it. So this song has the ambivalence of the fact that processes of freedom, or you can remove yourself from certain. So I want to talk about the fact that freedom is not necessarily a material or a physical thing. It's not just about being in a space where you're being guarded by someone with a machine gun. Obviously that's important, but I think that there are also other types of processes that have to do with the ability to produce an imaginary in certain contexts, and so the capacity to produce imaginaries based on freedom, which may be depend on the situation, is a strong thing. So this image of the prisoners listening to Johnny Cash makes me think about this ambivalent reality. The title, we are all contingent, but you are necessary. And it's a title that refers to that scene in many ways. So it's Johnny Cash who represents freedom in a way, maybe not him, but his music. While the prisoners are contingent in a way, we could say that they represent a kind of homogeneous mass without identifiable individuals. I don't know if all of you know where this quote comes from, the title, but I'm going to explain where I took it from, because it's the title of my talk, but it's also the title of a film. So, aside from the photo I showed of Johnny Cash, there's another photo that it brought to mind. I'm not going to show it to you because it's unpleasant and I don't want to show it to you, but it helps to explain how I've chosen the videos over the last 2 or 3 months, ever since Sophia rang me to invite me to do this talk. I've actually spent my whole life selecting these films. I write for Nativa.cat, which is a website with many writers, and I write about some of these things here. I'm not taking right away from it, but I'm saying, I'm pointing out that it's the fragility of this talk. So you may end up thinking at the end of this that I'm a guy that spends quite a lot of time on something quite embarrassing. Something else I wanted to mention is another image that explains this to me is the idea of when you're little and you keep a box with milk teeth that you've lost, for example.
So this is a box with my milk teeth that had fallen off. I don't know if any of you have done this, but there's these boxes, and like while your milk teeth are falling off, you just put them there. And, there's this idea, this strange idea, in the family tradition, that they actually allow you to do this. But I'm not saying that I actually did it or that I tried to do it, but they don't let you write your name on shit on the wall with your own shit. And this is something that kids just want to do. But they do allow you to put your teeth in a little box. If you Google this, I had this on my head, like that little blue box when I had my stuff and I put my teeth in. But I've Googled this, and this is totally nuts, because there's little boxes that have space for the precise teeth, and then there's like a little picture of the kid with no teeth. So this is a bit, a bit strange, isn't it? So why am I telling you this about this image of the box? Well, because in a way, these videos are like those milk teeth that have been put away in the box. And on the other hand, because that little box partly talks about what we're going to talk, this question of power and freedom, because I think that, that they allowed me to have the box with the teeth, being so not hygienic, something that totally beyond the patterns of what a child should be able to do. And, what they or they can't do, like the rules of the family, taking care of the child, totally, ignored, but that little act kind of rebelled against those patterns. So it has a certain resonance with the themes that I want to introduce today. So, think about that little box with the milk teeth. So that's the introduction.
No sé si habéis leído el texto de presentación
de este año del
festival, pero
if you read the text that was written for this year's festival, and there was a question raised which I particularly liked, and it's how the text ends. Who decides over our lives? And, in previous festivals, what was under the umbrella of the Copylove project, this research project that was carried out during the previous festivals. This question of life, putting life in the center, is very present. So coming back to this question of who's deciding over our lives, in order to talk about the commons, I think it's a good way of tying together what has been investigated in the other CEMOS festivals. But I was also interested in this because who decides over our life, it has this two assumptions. There's a someone, there's a who, there's a subject, there's a prince, that governs over a territory, there's a state that governs over a territory, or there's a president that, again, due to democratic delegation, governing over this area. There's a subject there, there's someone. And our lives speak about this necessity for autonomy, we need freedom, we need autonomy to govern over these lives that have to be sustained, within social ties, mutual dependence, etc. And this kind of commitment, so that isn't only tied into monetary questions. So I think that this who, this someone who decides over our lives, this concept of power and freedom, many times really doesn't have to do with a subject. So power, it's not a subject, it's not the state, it's not the prince. It's something that's, beyond and above us. Many times the power works in a relational level. It functions peer-to-peer. We reproduce it, in micro versions. I don't know if I'm going to achieve this, but this idea of power, not as something that dominates, and freedom as something that you decide, and that many times when you carry it out, when you practice it, what you're doing is actually holding on even harder. And you govern yourself, and I would like to explore this problem, so this is what I'm going to try. Let's see if I can make it. Okay, Rubén is going to try it, okay? So there's 4 sections to this source code. First one is power, second is freedom, third is what's normal, and the fourth is the community response. So we're going to start with power, and we'll start with the film, where I got the quote, and which actually gave the title for the source code. This film is Amanece que no es poco, known in English as Dawn Breaks, which is no small thing. It's not a film, it's a work of art. Amanece que no es poco, it's the best film ever of all time.
Es de José Luis Cuerda,
by José Luis Cuerda. It's filmed in Albacete, in the mountains, in the interior of Spain. It's a mad plot. So this Oklahoma researcher on a sabbatical, played by Antonio Resines, goes with his dad to this village. His dad is played by Luis Pijes. And it turns out that, you know, in this, they're holding elections in this village. The mayor is going to be elected. And the village prostitute is going to be voted in, same for the village gay, and you know, this whole series of characters who are going to be elected. So it's a very politically risky film. I mean, you know, in extremis, I would say. There's this moment where this father who's been living with his child for 30 years, his child happens to be black, and you know, like, he's met him 1,000 times, and like the father's saying, "Oh God, like, my kid's black, he's black, that black guy," and you know, this is like a risky film, but you know, I like it. You know, it's I do have a fetish with this film, but this subject, we're all contingent, but you are necessary, which is something that the mayor says. So you have the image of the mayor, you know, like by the woman treating her like an object with this thing on top of him. It looks like this big mafia boss. So there's this idea that, you know, like there's this democratically elected figure, but on the other hand, it's, you know, like a representation of power which leaves a lot to be desired. And all of this due to democratic decision. It seems that we should respect, you know, like that these people get elected, and, you know, they kind of like love this. So we carry on with this idea of power within democracy. But the next video makes it a bit complicated, makes the question more complicated. I don't know if, well, you know who that is. So I've been a total fanatic of anything like done by Jack Nicholson. I think that it's all good, you know, like, he can do nothing wrong. You know, like, I watch him on YouTube, like, picking up an Oscar, and like, he just does it wonderful. It's just, I can't explain it. It's love. And in spite of that, the character he plays in this film, A Few Good Men, is a quite repugnant character. He's a bit disgusting. And Jack Nicholson actually plays these characters like so well. And it's a film, I don't know if you've watched it, that basically Jack Nicholson is the Lieutenant Jessup, who's the lieutenant cultural of in Guantanamo Bay, and he's the king of the land. So he's part of the military camp, and he just does whatever he wants, and he doesn't have to give any explanations. So there's a problem in his unit, and one of his soldiers dies. Soldier Santiago, he's called, who actually wanted to leave the unit. He wanted to change to another unit because he wasn't comfortable, and, you know, didn't ask for permission, didn't follow the change of command, and went, you know, directly to other lieutenants, and having any audio problems, okay.
There's nothing I can do about it. So, as I was saying, Santiago is probably James in English. So when this, he didn't feel well, he didn't feel comfortable in his job, and he ends up being murdered by 2 of his fellow soldiers, who according to their story, they implement what's known as a code red, which is like a behavioral code, a punishment for having skipped a level of the command chain. And at this point, two lawyers come in. It's Demi Moore and Tom Cruise are the actors. This is the only scene of Tom Cruise's that... I was going to say it's the only good movie of Tom Cruise's, but I also like Magnolias. So the two lawyers come into it. Demi Moore comes and discovers that the story that the two soldiers have told isn't the whole story. So the problem isn't the code red, it's that that their chief has, so that the soldiers are trying to protect the colonel so that he doesn't have to face a military court. So that's Jack Nicholson's character, which we'll see in a second. And then we also have the Tom Cruise character, who's like a ironic, kind of lazy, doesn't really... He's a bit of a free rider, really, in the end, because he's the one that gets the credit, even though the female lawyer, Demi Moore, is the one who discovers what really went on. So those of you who have seen it probably can imagine what I'm going to play. It's the court case where the character played by Tom Cruise tries to use any means possible to get Colonel Jessup to admit that he gave the order for the red code. And the way he does it is by pushing him as far as he can. So he knows it's the only way it's going to happen, so he decides to play on his ego, to push the colonel's ego, because it's going to be the only way to get him to admit that he gave the order for Code Red.
Touched. Then why did he have to be transferred? Colonel, Lieutenant Kendrick ordered the Code Red, didn't he? Because that's what you told Lieutenant Kendrick to do.
Object! When you went back, you cut these guys loose! Your Honor, you had markers inside a bony transfer! Your Honor, you doctored the logbook! Damn it, Captain! You coerced the doctor!
Consider yourself in contempt!
Colonel Jessup, did you order the Code Red?
You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth! Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom. You weep for Santiago and you curse the Marines. You have that luxury. You have the luxury of not knowing what I know, that Santiago's death, while tragic, probably saved lives. And my existence, while grotesque and incomprehensible to you, saves lives. You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about at parties, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. We use words like honor, code, loyalty. We use these words as the backbone of a life spent defending something. You use them as a punchline. I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it. I would rather you just said thank you and went on your way. Otherwise, I suggest you pick up a weapon and stand a post. Either way, I don't give a damn what you think you are entitled to.
Did you order the Code Red?
I did the job. Did you order the Code Red? You're goddamn right I did!
Vamos.
Wow. There's several moments in that scene. We could take it apart surgically. But there's a moment when the colonel says that the lawyer can't understand how the colonel says, you don't understand how I guarantee your freedom. So he doesn't only think that he has the democratic right to do it, but he actually feels like he's a god, that he's over and above the other humans. So in a way he has what we could say a democratic power within the military hierarchy, but then through the Code Red, he can skip that hierarchy. So, in my talk, we're now moving away from democratic power, and we've gone into the grey area of this scene where we can say that Colonel Jessup would be like the elite class, the elite, the power elite, and Tom Cruise would be Albert Rivera, which on Spanish political. I'm not going to say the other political figure's name who is going through locals' heads, I'm sure. I'm going to talk about another film within this section on power that also touches on the idea of sovereign power. In this case, sovereign power that is not given by vote, like the first film, but it's a sovereign power that comes from the 18th century.
So the film, I don't know if you'll recognize it by this image, it's Mutiny on the Bounty. So I'm going to play the beginning, the title credits, because this makes it really horny, actually. This thing here just this one image, very suspicious looking typeset, but that's what they used to do in the old days for title credits. Something been lost that we should reclaim. Tarantino understands this. He's the only one who's playing that kind of melody. So this happens on the 18th century. It's about a British frigate traveling to Tahiti. Within the ship, we find the two characters. This is Marlon Brando, the Lieutenant Christian Fletcher, and the next one we see is Captain Blight. So they don't quite hit it off when they meet. So Captain Blight, has told him, like, you're a little brat, in a very kind way. So there's this subtitle that just says, I see, there's a black screen, that must come from Lucas, the editor. It says, special creative mishap. So coming back here we have the characters again. So the Captain Bligh and Lieutenant Fletcher are the two main characters of this film. So there's pure camaraderie. They're going to sail this ship together, but they don't get on too well because Captain Fletcher basically comes from the military, comes from the power elite, that kind of people, that fighting comes natural to them. While this guy comes from the conservatory, from the academy, from the research and the arts and the sciences. So this British frigate sailing to Tahiti to search for the breadfruit. What is breadfruit? So it's like promise similar to, like potatoes, or this great resource which at reduced cost you can actually feed a lot of people. And it can be like the productive resource for the nation. So the film says that if they go to Tahiti to search for the breadfruit, that's something good for the wealth of the nation. That's what's informing that trip. So how does Captain Bligh manage to defend his nation? Well, through discipline. He comes on screen again, and we see the many ways in which Captain Bligh sanctions his sailors because they're not following orders, they're not being productive, etc. On top of that, he disciplines them in particularly cruel ways. Yeah. So in this scene is when they get to the island, and they're going to search. They're going to search for this famous, they leave no stone unturned searching for this breadfruit. So this is like mad moment. I mean, this is the picture. This is, you know, like the typical scene where you have like the half sodomized natives who don't want to get to the ship. You know, the ship is like the beacon of civilization, but if you try to do something, we'll just shoot you down. And here we get to the coast, you know, like, and solemnly, you know, they set a foot in solid ground. So they're looking for this resource, the breadfruit, which is, you know, this natural resource held by the Tahitians, the indigenous people of the island. You know, in the end you don't really know if it's Tahiti, but the natives don't even know that it's there. So, you know, like, resource appropriation in a natural context is actually appropriated from someone who doesn't even conceptualize this in monetary terms. They use it in other ways, but not as it should be, which is its potential for profit creation for this nation. You know, this is modernity coming in, this is the Great Britain and the beginnings of the capitalist cycle. So there's this, so something happens here where, you know, they've gotten the breadfruit. You know, it's not something that looks really impressive that's gonna fit the nation. It's just this plant. So, you know, like, they have, like, the ship is full of this plant, and to enable to, you know, be able to dose the water, so this breadfruit, like, lasts for the duration of the voyage. What Captain Bligh does, who, this is not only metaphorical, but, like, this is quite clear-cut with his doctrine, he rations the water for the sailors in order to feed the breadfruit. What does this mean? This means that the wealth of the nation, what will produce wealth for the nation, is of those subjects who are working in order to provide that wealth. So this balance between, you know, the life of the sailors and the wealth of the nation, you know, I mean, the idea, I mean, with Captain Bligh's criteria, you know, like, where intention has to go, where they have to throw their weight, is obviously in the wealth of nation. So Fletcher, it turns out, wants to give water to one of the sailors.
Williams bebía agua de mar, señor. Iba a darle un poco de agua dulce. Me temo que sin ella morirá. Usted no va a darle agua a nadie sin mi permiso. Lleve ese caso abajo. Sí, señor. Bastardo, no volverás a tocarme con tu asqueroso pie. Gracias. Me llevará a los esos buscando el medio de sacarle del cuerpo su pretenciosa soberbia.
Aquí es donde empieza el motín.
This is, and thus the mutiny begins. And this is how they kick Captain Bligh out. Captain Bligh insists in this idea of, you know, Fletcher's doing this because he's just basically arrogant. He just cannot understand that he's doing it because, you know, like, so he doesn't kill off all the sailors. You know, he's just a wanker, that's why he does that. You know, he's just stupid. So the rebel side of the sailors, you know, stay there, and this is like the high point of the film, which is when the rebellious sailors come back to the island, and there's this image. So there we see the bounty, you know, sailing off, coming back to the island, and it's this idea of you know, whoever has rebelled against capital, against sovereign power, feel liberated, so they go to what their concept of freedom is, this exotic island. It has nothing to do with what they're used to, where they can enjoy life, they can put into practice all kinds of hedonist logics, no rules, no whips, no regulations. It's all fun, fun, fun. So this is the kind of freedom that the rebel sailors conceptualize. So there's a scene in this film that to me is like the key aspect of the film, which is the rebel sailors once on the island. They start arguing with Christian Fletcher what freedom means for them. They don't agree with this lieutenant, Christian Fletcher, the head of the Immunity, and the sailors that backed him up in the Immunity are not so in agreement on what freedom may be.
Tiene razón, Mills. Es posible que todos muriésemos ahorcados. Pero uno tiene que luchar por la dignidad. No se puede vivir sin ella. Escondernos aquí, temblando como culpables, cuando tenemos un caso justo que exponer ante los tribunales, es otro modo de morir. Y mucho menos soportable. Yo no tenía una noción exacta hasta este momento de cuál era el camino que debía seguir, pero ahora lo sé. ¿Quieren confiar en mí? Pero supongamos que Blanca haya sido recogido. Supongamos que lo haya juzgado y absuelto cuando lleguemos allá. Aunque fuera así, al juzgarnos a nosotros, se juzgaría nuevamente a Bly. Nuestro riesgo sería el riesgo de Bly también, y nuestra absolución sería su derrota. Así no volvería a haber más capitanes como Bly u otro de su especie en los buques de su majestad. Solo necesitamos convencer al pueblo británico de algo que ya conoce, que el terror y la crueldad son sus más funestos servidores.
Ese es el punto.
This is the key aspect. For the mutinied sailors, freedom is the island. For the lieutenant, freedom is justice. So the mutinied sailors actually burn down the ship, the Bounty, so they don't have to come back to England. And Lieutenant Fletcher ends up dying, burnt as the ship burns down. For the good of all, he set fire to the ship. We feared that you would forcibly take us to London.
Está bien, Mills. No fue culpa de ustedes. Bly dejó su huella en todos nosotros.
Esa idea de que Bly dejó su huella en todos nosotros.
So this idea that Bly left his mark on all of us, sovereign power disappeared, we get rid of the ship's captain, there's no whip anymore, but that power carries on reproducing itself with population because it's like branded by fire on their bodies. So there's not this idea of sovereign power, but disciplined power. How certain rules, how certain practices, certain ways of relating to each other, of acquiescence and disobedience are actually integrated in our body, but not integrated of like being lobotomized, but they're part of what we think. It's not thinkable. Let's go back to France to social justice. That's unthinkable. But as what you can conceptualize is getting rid of the ship, this can have quite tragic consequences. So the film ends with this image of, you can't really see it properly, but it's the frigate burning down and sinking. It's interesting, like the role of the ship in this film, because the ship, the frigate, represents desire, it represents a prison and freedom. During the different cycles that comprise the film. So the ship itself changes its status depending at the stage of the film. So this has a lot to do with how this technology, the technology of the ship, is always socially determined. This one's for Jaron Rowan. So second block, freedom.
So we're talking about power, so supposedly freedom is the other side. And there are three types of freedom. There's breaking free. In the movie, there was the breaking free of Captain Bligh and the idea of the island, which was the mutineers' idea, and then the idea of justice, which was the captain's idea. So these three different ideas of freedom appear in the film. I want to go back to the initial idea. When I play to the beginning of the talk, when I play the song by Johnny Cash, these images come from the album Lomax archive. The Lomax, the hunter of songs, I think it's an anthropologist that recorded work songs. So here we have prisoners in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas who were doing repetitive, forced work, and they would sing as they did this work, and the songs are about guilt, about freedom. So once again, there's this ambivalence. So for those of you who know about music, I've been told this, I didn't know it myself. So this was the origin of a lot of other songs, later songs about work, prisoner songs. These prisoner songs became the basis later of black music in the US. But back at that moment when they sang it, we have to ask ourselves, did that produce more freedom or more submission, more imprisonment? I was talking to Guillermo Zapata before. His audiovisual source codes were great. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. And we were saying, so these songs weren't just used to follow the rhythm to make it easier to work, but they were also, when a prisoner managed to escape, the people singing would change the lyrics in order to transmit a message to the escaping prisoners of whether he was being followed or not, for example. So it was a way of helping the prisoners that were escaping. I can't talk about freedom without playing this film, which is Braveheart. As you know, it's a story of William Wallace in the Scottish War for Independence, which theoretically the film presents a heroic figure who sacrifices himself for his country. But I'd like to offer a different reading of this scene that I'm about to play for you.
Bueno, yo
this scene, I saw this scene, I've seen this scene a lot of times, enough to do this talk. I've watched it even more time, and every time I watch it I get shivers. For some reason it really gets to me, it really touches me. I think it's not just the idea of a male heroic figure who sacrifices himself for his country and his people for freedom. I think it's that, but it's also two things. So it's about power that knows that by killing it will lose power, it will no longer rule. So at the beginning the executioner comes and tries to make him ask for mercy. So the executioner plays the figure of the person who represents the king and is telling the prisoner to ask for mercy. So it's like saying, I'd rather you beg for mercy than to kill you. I don't want to make you die, I want to make you live, because power knows that it's easier to govern, to control the rebel if you make them live under disciplinary conditions than to kill the rebellious body so that it can continue to reproduce itself. So what William Wallace really does is not the male heroic figure sacrificing itself, but it's actually about what the multitude will. It reflects what the crowd is going to do. So what William Wallace does represents the crowd. If he asks for mercy, if the rebel body asks for mercy, the people do. So I think that William Wallace is not a heroic individual figure, it's a collective figure, a collective body asking for freedom.
So another idea I have to do with freedom, a bit different, it's Ayn Rand. You've heard about her, I'm sure. If no one is booing her, then maybe there's lots of Randian fans. She's a so-called philosopher, better known for her theories on rational egoism. This is what she called it. So, you could probably explain this in a more complex way, but her idea in, like integral egoism, like acts of egoism is like where you can find purity, and this is what every one of us has to do, like to carry out this rational egoism. This will eventually produce collective benefit. Like the subject is not dependent, independent, produces usually his own conditions, these ideas, what he or she wants to walk, how they want to love. I'm taking all these decisions, some theories about love over there, which is, what can I say? These are Ayn Rand's ideas. So this is the film based on The Fountainhead, her novel. So it's a film by a quite peculiar director, King Vidal. So I'm going to play a scene where the main character, Howard Rock, who's an architect who, like he says, he lives with his integrity, his values, that rational egoism, that, collective intelligence doesn't exist. Only individual intelligence and the integrity of the individual subject exists. He also says that in the end, this is what has brought him to blow up with dynamite this residence that he had, thought of, but the state, the state, like a totalitarian socialist state, according to the film, started deforming his project and, building a different residence to what he had conceptualized. He doesn't care if it's for the common good. He had designed it a particular, specific way. And, he just wanted to implement his idea. He didn't even want money on exchange. And, he just blows it up with dynamite. He's not happy about it. So he defends this particular posture, blowing up a residence designed by the state, differing from his original plans. There's no sound. Oh, it's me.
building was disfigured at the whim of others who took all the benefits of my work and gave me nothing in return. I came here to say that I do not recognize anyone's right to 1 minute of my life, nor to any part of my energy, nor to any achievement of mine, no matter who makes the claim. It had to be said. The world is perishing from an orgy of self-sacrificing. I came here to be heard in the name of every man of independence still left in the world. I wanted to state my terms. I do not care to work or live on any others. My terms are a man's right to exist for his own sake.
Esta idea, ¿no?
This libertarian Randian idea concerns integrity, the right of the subject to think and enact those reasons, that integrity that they feel is the right. Nothing to do with liberation, social justice, self-reproducing autonomy, new imaginaries, but, you know, freedom as integrity. So I wanted to play a video that's a little bit like, you know, like taking this idea of integrity to the limit, a little bit of a caricature, an exaggeration. It's not that I actually agree with anything that Howard Roark has said. I mean, probably out of all the clips that I'm playing, it's what I least agree with. But so I wanted to parody this, and I'm going to parody it with a video about this artist from Barcelona. And so this video is called A Determined Mystique, with music by Astrud, and they're really good. And this teenage football player from Atletico de Bilbao gets a mystique. So a mystique is this revelation, a mystique. You know, they never tell us what a mystique is. But this teenager who plays football for Atletico Bilbao has a mystique, becomes an artist, and becomes gay. So those are the archetypes that they're playing with in this video. And he becomes an artist, gets a scholarship, buys a camera, this and that. And he's there in his room, you know, like giving it all with the little lights. You know, it's like half hipster, half crappy. And all of a sudden this subject, who's older than him, comes into the scene, saying he's an artist from the 60s. 60s, 70s to be precise, you know, those years. And this 60s or 70s artist, you know, gives him some advice. And I'd like you to see this, you know, thinking about, you know, like the teenager who becomes a gay artist, but contrasted with Howard Roark saying that integrity is, you know, it's a thing to do. So let's see if we can put those together somehow. Here it goes.
La pregunta.
So what we now have to ask ourselves is whether eating your own shit is the highest level of integrity you can reach. I think Ayn Rand would have doubts about that. So we come to number 3, the normality. I've touched on this already earlier in the talk, especially, for example, when the mutineers are on the island, when they burn the ship and kill Lieutenant Fletcher. they're already producing certain conditions to do with what they consider normal. So they're normalizing certain rules or to do with what their life is going to be from then on on the island. So by burning the ship and by Fletcher dying. So they've normalized a way of living that's based, they haven't invented themselves, it's based on where they come from. But a better explanation of these processes of normalization is Michel Foucault.
Avant même toute autre chose, c'est celle-ci. On a l'habitude, du moins dans notre société européenne, de considérer que le pouvoir, il est localisé entre les mains du gouvernement et il s'exerce par un certain nombre d'institutions bien particulières qui sont l'administration, en France on appelle ça préfectorale, je ne sais pas comment on dit ailleurs, l'administration, la police, l'armée. On sait que toutes ces institutions-là sont faites pour transmettre les ordres, les faire appliquer et punir les gens qui n'obéissent pas. Mais je crois que le pouvoir politique, il s'exerce encore, il s'exerce en outre, de plus, par l'intermédiaire d'un certain nombre d'institutions qui ont l'air comme ça de n'avoir rien de commun avec le pouvoir politique, qui ont l'air d'en être indépendantes et qui ne le sont pas. On sait bien que l'université, d'une façon générale, tout le système scolaire, qui en apparence est fait simplement pour distribuer le savoir, on sait que cet appareil scolaire est fait pour maintenir au pouvoir une certaine classe sociale et exclure des instruments du pouvoir toute une autre classe sociale. Quelque chose comme la psychiatrie, qui en apparence aussi n'est destinée qu'au bien de l'humanité et à la connaissance des psychiatres, la psychiatrie est encore une certaine manière de faire peser un pouvoir politique sur un groupe social. La justice également. Bon, et il me semble que la tâche politique actuelle dans une société comme la nôtre, c'est de critiquer le jeu des institutions apparemment les plus neutres et les plus indépendantes, de les critiquer, de l'attaquer de telle manière que la violence politique qui s'exerçait obscurément en eux surgisse et pour qu'on puisse lutter contre elle. À vouloir tout de suite, enfin si on cherche tout de suite à donner le profil et la formule de la société future sans avoir bien fait la critique de tous les rapports de violence politique qui s'exercent dans notre société, on risque de les laisser se reconstituer, même à travers des formes aussi nobles, apparemment aussi pures que celles du syndicalisme anarchiste.
It's one of the best flashcards in the history of philosophy. It's Foucault's reading of Chomsky. Chomsky sitting on the other side of the couch in this thing, and I'm not sure which of their two models is the better one. So there are forms of knowledge that, so that there's knowledge is power, and power makes us normalize spheres that we believe in. There are pre-existing conditions that are neutral. That's one theory, but there's the other theory that's they're not neutral, which is that they have a class bias, a gender bias, for example. A video that explains this in a very clear way. I was looking for another one, but the content is basically the same. And this, in a different way, it says exactly the same thing that Foucault has just said.
Familia
Bueno, la idea que...
So you get the idea, I think, right? So this idea that they like to be 5 in the family. So we can imagine that the father, the one that's always in the centre and keeps saying, we love it. You get the idea that he set the whole thing up and he told the little girl, Julieta, you come and say, I like it at this point. It seems like it's been choreographed probably by the father. The fact that they don't blink, these puppets, also makes me think it's a very strange video. And also thinking about the context where it's shown, which is Sesame Street, kids watching, and so it's about the normalization of the family, of the institution of the family. 2 more ideas I want to share about the normal, things that normalize certain ways of living, certain ideas, but there's a paradox, which is that by exercising freedom, while you exercise and desire freedom, what you produce is more government or more power, more and more dominant power. Now I'm going to play a piece of a video by Adam Curtis, which you may have seen, The Century of the Self, that talks about a shady character called Edward Bernays, and he was a relative of Sigmund Freud, who used ways of social analysis, Sigmund Freud did, to do marketing, basically. So Curtis, in this scene, Curtis has an interview with Bernays and some images by which he illustrates this exercising of freedom and how this exercising of freedom produces other kinds of government or of power.
Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it.
He said, we're losing half of our market because men have invoked a taboo.
It's Edward Bernays.
That's Edward Bernays.
Can you do anything about that? I said, let me think about it. And then I said, allow your permission to see a psychoanalyst to find out what cigarettes mean to women. He said, what it cost? So I called up Dr. Brill. A.A. Brill was a leading psychoanalyst in New York at that time.
How come you didn't call your uncle? Why didn't you
Su tío es Sigmund Freud.
The uncle is Sigmund Freud, of course.
A.A. was one of the first psychoanalysts in America. And for a large fee, he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power. He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power, then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises. Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came, and Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment. And so he was ready with a phrase which was torches of freedom. And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch. You see? And so all of this is there together. There's emotion, there's memory, there's a rational phrase, even though it's using a lot of emotional elements, it's a phrase that works in a rational sense. And all of this is together.
todo eso está junto.
All of this is together. Freedom, the freeing of the women's bodies, the suffragettes' rights, the market niche produced by opening up a new target group, which is like women smokers. All of this stuff is there. I don't share the discourse that Alan Curtis starts off with, and he sometimes forces a bit, which is that there's some malevolent force above that's machinating and changing everything and affecting everything. I don't think that's the way it happens. I think that there are a lot of opportunities to prove autonomy, but I do think that it all does happen together. So while you exercise freedom, you can produce power. So this also illustrates the same idea. This is quite a bad film, between bad and terrible. But I've seen it a lot of times, so it's Pirates of Silicon Valley. So this is Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, which are played quite in quite a ridiculous way in the film. So Bill Gates is cool and young and extroverted, creative. Well, that was Steve Jobs, and Bill Gates is this grey guy who only thinks about the grey production chain of his work and is very specialised on technical things. It's like the geeky. So they're kind of archetypes of these two different types of young man. And there's a moment in the film where Microsoft, Bill Gates and his team, go to Macintosh and ask Steve Jobs to show them his latest little machine, and they take a walk around the Apple premises. So the grey, old-fashioned guy goes and visits the new entrepreneuring young man.
We have culture. They no taste, no original thinking. So they can be useful to us. Time for the dog and pony show.
Esta música de Darth Vader, ¿no?
This is like Darth Vader music. There he is. Sorry.
Es un pirata que lleva 52 horas seguidas trabajando, es un trabajador suyo, ¿no? Un tío fiel a la empresa.
Let me show you the future. It's top secret. Still about a year away from introduction. Ultimate, insanely great fusion of art and science. It's called Macintosh. Definitely not Lisa. It's a graphic user interface. I don't understand. How does a computer handle a mouse cursor display? No, the hardware's got nothing to do with the mouse. It's already on the side. Enough! Sorry. Torture their artists with what they can.
So here there's a moment where they have a little clash, and Steve tells him his secret.
Some technical questions that he doesn't know how to carry out. They're artists, they're not employees. So there's this idea of, the entrepreneur that, carries out his passion. That's the freedom that's allowed to fall thanks to the market. So you've probably heard this before. So our last idea on normalization as a way of producing power or something that has to be negotiated, which is the film Network by Sidney Lumet from the end of the 60s. Great film. You see it now, and it's just as relevant. So Thomas Bill is a TV anchor from the #1 TV network, and that starts going downhill. He starts getting old, and they want to fire him. So what he does is, in his last program, his goodbye program, it goes live on TV, and he says that life is basically shit, and he's going to take his own life. So that just blows totally up. The audience level goes through the roof. So at the end of the program, his daily show, he gets his show, it goes on. He has basically shits over everything, criticizes everything, and TV logic is dictated by audience level. So an interesting thing is when he goes and he criticizes the network itself, which has been bought by this obscure financial interests, by the Arabs. They want to buy American democracy, and this is where we get to the point where the owner, the financial capital side of the network, sits him down on a table and tells him, Mr. Bill, I'm going to tell you how the world works. And the idea of normalization, of how to normalize certain patterns of power, what's a political conflict, how to turn that into a natural conflict. The idea of normalization is that the market, it's an ecosystem. It's, this is a massive, epic fight.
System of systems. One vast and immense, interwoven, interacting, multivariate, multinational dominion of dollars. Petrodollars, electrodollars, multi-dollars, rank marks, rings, rubles, pounds, and shekels. It is the international system of currency which determines the totality of life on this planet. That is the natural order of things today. That is the atomic and subatomic and galactic structure of things today. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone. Am I getting close to yours to be? You get up on your little 21-inch screen and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today. What do you think the Russians talk about in their councils of state? Karl
predetermined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business, Mr. Beale. It has been since man crawled out of the slime. And our children will live, Mr. Beale, to see that perfect world in which there's no war or famine, oppression or brutality. One vast and ecumenical holding company for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, in which all men will hold a share of stock, all necessities provided, all anxieties tranquilized, all boredom amused.
I wanted to play the whole thing because I don't dare to cut this halfway through. It's so good from beginning to end that I can just chop it up. 1977, I think. So the last section, with this we'll end, community responses. So in the face of crisis, depressions, institutions that manage power, the financialization of everything, which, you know, there's supposed to be natural cycles, and it's what we're going through, and there's this community response. So, you know, we have to preserve the commons, we have to steward them, we have to implement other forms of collective production. So there's a film that talks specifically about this, and it deals with the 29 crisis and the Great Depression. And it's Our Daily Bread by King Vidor again, that guy from the Fountainhead. You know, like integral freedom. 1934. This is from 1934. So a couple, they lose everything. They can't live in the city, so they go to a community farm, and you know they get into collective property. So this film from 1934 is chock full of micro-politics, of micro sexism, microphobia, micro-corrupt leadership that are then normalized. It gets into the good stuff, but also normalizes, it sees that normals that which takes place in community management cannot be rationalized, cannot be fixed. It's the way it is. So I'm going to play it at a low volume so I can go over it. So, you know, like, it's like, you know, like if one man can get this done, 10 men can do all this much more. So he comes up with this idea of, you know, like collectivizing property, of going to this abandoned farm in the outskirts of the city, and there's this thing like, you know, like the women, you know, she's totally subordinated to whatever he comes up with. So we see that in this film too. And here we see them that, you know, like all this men wanted to work on this land, you know, they're planting signs to recruit people. So during the film, you know, they carry out assemblies. And in one of them, you know, they're going to decide on the governance protocols. So the crowd is going to decide. And they're not that much into democracy. Municipalist discourse. So this is the most similar thing to Podemos that I've been able to find. This is the big moment where the state they auction the property, and it's what happens now is especially interesting in this scene because they auction the property and the community, the community is included in the auction, and there's something that happens here that will remind us of something of a citizen movement that we've seen these last few years. The community, they defend their property with their own governance protocols, which is disobedience, they're threatening the capitalist that wants to acquire the property. Don't know what the subtitles went. The community is offering very little. So that's like, you know what the law is. After two offers, you have to close the sale. The article such and such states this. So this reminds me that this combination of disobedience and trying to get capitalists, not to try and buy things, through processes which are not quite legal, and that's corruption in a nutshell. And law, and and knowing what law is, and following the law. That's what part of the anti-foreclosure movement has actually enacted in Spain. The film goes on with a community problem, which is the drought, the erosion of that common resource, through which, if that wasn't clear. So the whole community has to get to work. And this is particularly interesting because, the last stage of the film is about this, you dig up a ditch, the water irrigation system, there's this whole manual thing of bringing the river all the way to the harvest. And the other film is this massive celebration because right at the end, what they achieve is diverting the water from the river through the ditch to the harvest. So that's it. So the film ends with this epic idea where the community has changed, what was like the state ownership for collective ownership, and they have a half or autonomous mode of government, and the water is watering the harvest thanks to the ditch. So it's interesting to see the limitations of community management over here, because the resources, the effort, and the intention, the way that they've put, diverting a river, this is has to do with the healthcare issue and universal public health. So I don't think this is a bad thing to play this. So I'm going to finish off with this film, Lego film, which is, incredible. I mean, whichever way you look at it, this film is just epic. And this bloke, MX, who's, a basic walker, starts off, he's just singing off, about he's alienated, he's dominated, but, he becomes a specialist. So specialist is that figure, which legend tells has been chosen. He's the chosen one, he has to save the world. So the rest, they're master builders, they're incredible with 4 Lego blocks. They just can build wonders. They'll make a fighter plane that you can kill your enemies. And he really doesn't know. He's just a walker. He doesn't know how to fit those pieces together. But he's the chosen one. So his plans. He says that his plans to overcome the enemy. Well, you'll see they're incredible. What can we do to overcome the enemy?
Instrucciones. Eso no me gusta. Eso me suena raro. No, escuchad, escuchad. Chicos, tenéis todos tanto talento, tanta imaginación, pero no sabéis trabajar en equipo. Yo solo soy un obrero, pero si tenemos un plan y trabajamos todos juntos, podríamos construir un rascacielos. Vosotros sois maestros constructores. Imaginaos lo que podría pasar Si hicierais eso, podríais salvar el universo.
Bien dicho, Emmett. Bien dicho.
¿En serio?
Has dado un buen discurso, promete.
Vale. Que alguien me traiga unos rotuladores. Un poco de cartulina. Y un pegamento con purpurina.
Esta idea.
So at the end, like get me some markers, some glitter. It really reminds me of I don't know if there's any here. The new architects. They do everything with like pieces of wood and like urban gardens and just bring me some paper, some scissors, and and we'll renew democracy. So there's a little bit of that. But in spite of this, it's interesting to see that this idea that like to confront power, you have to follow the instructions, the manual. This is an interpretation which is quite clear in this film. You don't have to believe me; you can see it. Following structures in the end, that this is how you seize power. A lot of people will say this, and like if you get into the institutions, you're gonna turn into the institutions. If you follow the manual, you will just reproduce what power wants you to do. But they say no. If we follow the instructions, they won't really find out that we want to change power from the inside. But there's this inside, outside, back and forth. And I'm not saying that this is a solution to everything that I've talked about up till now. And I really don't think that hegemony focused power processes, the normalization of a certain kind of people or a certain class of people should be governing or producing democracy, and that this will happen as a result of following the manual. I think that if we're following, within this challenge where, like we have the commons in the center and we want to reinvent certain power dynamics. So, to squeeze this metaphor, you can follow the manual, but you can also take stock of what goes beyond sovereign power, but disciplinary power or normalization. So many times, if you're going to assist the institutions or follow the manual, maybe you can change sovereign power, but disciplinary power and normalization processes you may not change. So, there's a challenge over here. The challenge of producing freedom has more to do with those processes of normalization and disciplinary power than just changing sovereign power. And I would like to end with one last thing, and you have to help me out with this one. So this totally like flower child image. It's a cartoon show called Thomas the Tank Engine. And there's a song from Thomas and Friends or Thomas the Tank Engine. Rules and Regulations is the title of this ditty. And I actually have the lyrics here. So, I'm just gonna hand it out. So, whomever feels like it's in the mood, just to belt it out together. So I'm gonna play it, for a little bit, so you get the rhythm, what it's about, the melody, the content, the tone of the piece. I'm gonna play it. If you want to hum along, if you're like really into it, I'm just gonna get up and belt it out. This is just the rehearsal, okay? It just takes over you.
Ahora viene el estribillo.
So here comes the chorus. A chord. This is the high point. I mean, this is epic. You know, like, stop beating around the bush. Yeah. Where would we be now? You know, this is the greatest song of all time. You know, like all this jolliness, and look what they're talking about. Okay then. So we've seen what it's about. So this is my hypothesis. Maybe you won't share it with me, but I think that if we sing it, you know, like just skipping it everything, we're gonna turn it around completely. So this is my hypothesis. Okay, so let's go and do it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a mic, so I'm not gonna sing too loud.
Bend the words a bit, you try to make things fit. You know that you should be doing.
So hard.
Yeah, doesn't matter who you are. Obey the rules, you'll go far. We are in the wrong song.
Rules and regulations now. Aquí esto hay que darlo todo en el estribillo. Is it sure? Sometimes it's so hard.
No. Together or not at all?
Where will we be now? La última vuelta,
Okay, one last go round, and we're finished. Now, you have to give it your all. This is the big conclusion.
Protection.
Like condoms.
So hard.
Now, this is a big moment.
Regulations now.
Isn't it a chore?
Sometimes it's so hard. Stick rules, code laws. Engancha, ¿sí o no? O sea, yo ya no sé vivir sin esto.
It's catchy, isn't it? I wouldn't be able to live without this. Thank you. Thank you so much. A big finish.
Nos llaman y vamos a muchísimas fiestas de sociedad. Y entonces nos fuimos.